The storm recedes, the sun rises, and the day is set for siskins. Tucked into the sparkling gorse, these youngsters are itching in anticipation. It must feel like the last day of school with the whole wide world waiting. The question is, though, will they or won't they? Find out on Springwatch. Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2024 at the very, very, very sunny Arn Nature Reserve.
What a difference!
Look at this. Last night, cold, drizzly, windy.
Bleak.
Oh, much nicer here. We're live at the OSPB Arn Reserve, of course, this year. Got off to a cracking start. We've had great peregrines. We've had a great range of nests. Beginning of the week, I promised you something bold. Something brand new to science. Well, I've had to work back through the literature, and all I can say to you, I have to moderate that a little bit and say almost new to science, but tremendously exciting.
It is. It's actually really interesting.
Very interesting, and it's been happening in a pond near you all of your life, and you won't have noticed it, and it's fascinating, and it's coming up later. Stay tuned.
I'm going to start the show with some positive news, because yesterday our big story with our nest was about the blue tits. Two of them died, the chicks, and it was all a bit doom and gloom, and we didn't hold much hope for the survival of the 3 remaining chicks. But if we go to that nest live now, this is the positive news. Look, those 3 chicks are looking stronger. The female's looking better as well. Yesterday she was soaking wet. She's now all dry and the chicks are doing well. They're alive and well. So what has changed? Well, the weather's changed, and that's made a big difference because it's meant that these chicks are being fed more often and they're getting better food. So our nest watchers counted that they were getting 5 feeds an hour yesterday. Today in the same period, 12 feeds per hour. Variety of food, including caterpillars and spiders. So as I say, more feeds, better food, and you can see those chicks are stronger. So although they started with 8 chicks, and very sadly 5 of them perished, the fact that there's only 3 mouths to feed now means that it's positive news for those chicks, and I'm holding thumbs that they're going to actually do really well.
Let's hope so, but it's all been a bit birdy, hasn't it?
Bit birdie.
Bit birdie. Let's diversify. Let's go into some insects. Take a look at this wonderful photograph that was sent to us by Terry Bagley. He took it last week at Ham Wall, and it features no less than 152. Yes, someone counted them. These are 4 spotted chaser butterflies that have all emerged. That is spectacular. Let's have a look at this. I said something else, I meant dragonflies. Here is one of the adults. You can see how they get their name, 4 spots there, and they regularly chase things. Superb stuff, and this is the season of dragonfly emergence. Our cameraman James Stevens was out last weekend and he found this. So this is the aquatic larvae of the dragonfly that has emerged, climbed up onto a stick, and here it is a little later when the back of that has split open and the adult, the flying adult, is emerging here, alien, twitching. And throughout the course of the night, it will flip over, dry out its wings and turn into something even more spectacular that looks like this. It's our largest species of dragonfly, can fly at 30 miles an hour, and it's a ferocious airborne predator. And that is a cracking photo, almost symmetrical.
Oh, I like it though. I like that it's a little bit wonky.
Well, that's because you like things broken and I like things perfect.
I like things broken because they mend, they get stronger, and they show resilience.
Okay.
Do you know, I love it when you send us in a curious photo, a photo that gives us a little bit of a mystery. Look at this. What on earth is going on here? This is a birch tree. Photo was taken in Cumbria, and you can see it's covered up. It's covered in rolled up leaves. Look, can you see them all? What made those? Well, we know because they sent us the photograph, and it's actually a type of weevil. There we go, that's the weevil, and you can see it's cut a little bit out of that leaf. So what it does is it nips the stalk enough to soften the leaf, which enables it to then curl it into a cigar shape, and then it lays its eggs inside that. Look how neat that is. It's really cool, isn't it?
It's remarkable that such a small insect can complete such a feat of architecture, isn't it?
And great protection for the eggs and the young.
Fantastic stuff. OK, a couple of insects. What about some fish? Take a look at this. These are small spotted cat sharks at 33 metres down. They were filmed by Lee Morris from the Manx Wildlife Trust. And we've counted, there were 16 here, there could be more, and they're all males. Now, they're not typically seen in aggregations like this. They have been before, it's not unique, but not very often. And because they're all males, one can only presume this is something to do with their mating behaviour, but it remains a little bit of a mystery.
I'm a big fan of sharks, so great to see them featured on the watch. It's very difficult to film, and that's why we don't get that many photographs of them. But please continue to send your photographs and your comments and your videos to the usual address. Right, let's have a catch up with our other nests. We've got a fantastic variety of them. There they all are, and I'm going to take you to the one in the middle on the left, which is the barn owl. Here we go. There's the barn owl, having a good old snooze. The female's at the back on the, well, I'm not going to tell you what she's on because it's been a bit of a mystery, because for the last few days all we've seen is a nice fluffy barn owl in our screen or on our screen. But this is what we saw yesterday. As she stood up, she revealed 3 chicks, and as she lifted her leg, she gives a leg up to one of those chicks, very gently puts the leg down again, and delicately, tries to move around. She definitely doesn't want those sharp talons piercing any of her chicks. 12:45, you can see the other egg is starting to crack. She broods. A few hours later, at 4:37, she stands up, and we can see the 4th chick. So now we know that we've got 4 chicks and 1 remaining egg. Again, very delicately, she sits back down. And then when the morning came, that's our nighttime cameras that are in black and white. And as Chris said yesterday, delighted to be able to have colour on our barn owls in the day. There's the egg, and there are the little chicks underneath. But you know, it's great, Chris, isn't it, to see these chicks so small, because usually, I mean, we often have barn owls on the watches, but normally we only get our cameras up on them when they've hatched and they're a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
So to see them that tiny is really special.
Spectacular stuff. If you've been watching for the last couple of days, you know that we've already been looking at some nests that are on the brink of fledging. The siskins that we saw earlier are chiff-chaffs, 5 of them in their little nest, looking like they want to get out, and also our blackcaps. Well, let's have a look at those blackcaps. A couple of days ago, we were a little bit worried because one of them was behaving a little oddly. Look at this, it's twisting and shaking its head, and it did that repeatedly. So it seemed to be something wrong, but every time the adults come back, it was taking the food, and it's continued to grow. This morning, however, it was time to leave. And at 6:54, the first of the 3 chicks that were in there branched out into the brambles, sort of semi-fledged. Technically, fledging means flying away. These birds are not flying, they're jumping into the foliage. It makes sense, of course. You spread yourselves out there, you haven't got all of your chicks in one basket should a predator arrive. A little while after that, the second one goes, and then after a bit of a poop and a wait, finally the third of those 3 chicks disappeared off into the brambles. They don't go too far, just a few metres at most. And of course the adults come back to feed them in that area, and that relies upon little contact calls between the adults and those youngsters. So here you see one sleeping, the adult will come back in, produce that call, it will wake up, call itself, and then the adult will come in and give them the food. It's nice to see those blackcaps getting their 3 successfully out of the nest, and fingers crossed that the one with the odd movement makes it.
That's a great ending, is it? It's a happy ending. It's our first successful fledging, and hopefully there will be more. Well, that's a little roundup of our nest down here on the south coast of Dorset. We're going to head up to the west coast of Scotland to the beautiful Isle of Bute to see what Megan's up to.
The island is so aptly named, isn't it? The Isle of Bute, because it is absolutely stunning. And I've made my way to an entirely new habitat for today's episode. I've done the forest, I've done the lochs. Now I'm at the coast, at the glorious Scalpsea Bay. It is an epic landscape of huge proportion. You can see the diversity, that colour of blue, and Isle of Arran and Kintyre in the background there. But making its home in the bay is a population of common seals. This around 2-year-old juvenile having a rest after spending perhaps 80% of its day diving for food in the sea. Uber cute, uber cute. And the seals are just all the way over on that headland over there. And of course, when we're watching seals, we have to be incredibly careful not to disturb them. If we can stay at least 100 metres away, that would be really good, because if we push them off into the sea and they're thermoregulating, it can be really damaging for them, so always be cautious. And this is why we have Steve Phillips, our wildlife camera operator here, with this epic long lens. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
Have you got any seals live for us right now?
We're a lot more than 100 metres away. We're about 1 kilometre according to my lens.
That's
but
good.
I'll zoom in and show you.
What have we got?
There's
Oh,
one
look
in
at
the
that.
middle there.
There they are, all holed out.
There are 4 I can count.
4. Look at them there,
Little
sleepy.
scratch.
Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much, Steve. Goodness, that's nice, isn't it? Live seals for you. Now, Steve has been out throughout the last couple of days to really see what they're up to when they come to the land. And common seals are gorgeous. They're also known as harbour seals, of course. They're about 2 metres in length. And they're iconic because they often do this banana pose. They've also got a concave head shape in profile, V-shaped nostrils. And they are doing much better here on the west coast of Scotland than anywhere else in the UK. Around the UK, there's 55,000 common seals and 120,000 grey seals. And the reason we think they're doing much better here on the west coast is that there's less competition with the greys and also a wider variety of food resources as well. And they still argue and bicker, of course, about who gets the best haul-out spot. But to see seals in their element, you have to go below the waves when they're at their most agile and flexible, twisting and turning to get all of the different fish and crustaceans that they eat. And this was sent by Galway Bay, a marine institute in Ireland, and it shows them on a static camera, foraging, playing, investigating what the camera is. But normally when these seals dive, they don't do it for very long and it's quite shallow, but at extremes they can dive up to 630 metres below the waves and up to half an hour. And if a human tried to do that, well, we'd get decompression sickness pretty quickly and suffer potential fatal consequences. So how do seals go about doing it? Well, here we go. Now, this amazing device was invented by the seal mammal research at St Andrews University in Scotland. And it's essentially like the devices you wear on your wrist if you go to the gym. They tell you a bit about your biology. But for a seal perspective, it tells the researchers exactly where the blood flow goes around the animal's body as it begins to dive. And to illustrate that effectively, it's a bit windy, I'm getting hair in my mouth, I have this fabulous friend who's come to help me out. Now, they don't stand like this, obviously, but it gives you an illustration of the seal's body. Now, when it's thinking of taking a dive, the first thing it does is takes in as much oxygen into its muscles as it possibly can. And what it will do first is restrict the preliminary vessels around its body that don't support its vital organs, because if it's not necessary, they're not going to put energy into it. So the preliminary vessels get restricted and they increase the blood flow to the brain, because seals have the ability to cognitively decide where the blood should go around their body. Next up, before they take that dive, they exhale all the air they can in their lungs. Put it down there, in their lungs here. It helps them with buoyancy, of course, make sure they can stay under the water for longer. And then the heart. Now, when I go into cold water, I don't know about you, but I feel like my heart rate increases a little bit. It gets a little bit chilly, my body reacts to it. For a seal, it's entirely the opposite. Now, when they're resting on their land, their heartbeat is about 135 beats per minute. When they're diving, only 60. They reduce their heart rate by that much and can also reduce the temperature in their brain by about 3 degrees. They're phenomenal mammals, and the fact that they have this ability to change the blood flow as they dive deeper, and they can restrict and contract even more extremes when they go down, is impressive. So whenever you're out seeing seals, you're going to not just see them lounging around on the shore as they do, but you can also know how smart they are physiologically to be able to dive, make the most of a seemingly harsh environment, or harsh in terms of our biology anyway. What fantastic mammals. Now it's a little bit windy up here, and Yolo Williams, all the way over in Hengistbury Head down south, I feel like you've sent the wind up to us, Yolo. What's that all about?
I'll tell you what, Megs, Hengistbury Head tonight is beautiful. Hardly any wind, sunshine, blue sky. It is glorious, and it gives us actually the opportunity to enjoy the habitats they have crammed into a small area here. We have the shallow lagoons, we have beaches, and on these beaches, of course, we saw the ringed plover, we have heathland, and we have pools. And of course, all of those habitats means that they are brilliant for wildlife. It's a great place for reptiles, it's a great place for amphibians, and particularly for insects. Now have a look at this sandy bank behind me here. It's like a bit of Swiss cheese. And many of those holes will have been dug out by solitary bees and solitary wasps. And in this area, they've recorded an incredible 77 different species of solitary bees and 28 different species of solitary wasps. But of course, not all the holes you find here have been dug out by insects. There are slightly larger holes. I'll try and find one for you here. Here we are. And these have been dug out by natterjack toads, a very, very rare nocturnal toad. Now, they emerge in early spring when the temperature is consistently above 7 degrees centigrade. And that is about 4 to 8 weeks later than the common frog and the common toad. And they'll use these burrows throughout the year, of course. They need to hide away from the sun. And that was all filmed under license. You've got to have a license to film these animals, and we believe that's the first time the emergence has ever been filmed, especially here in the UK. And the temperature in these burrows is remarkably constant. Scientists have found that even when the temperature on the surface of the sand hits a scorching 60 degrees centigrade, in the burrow it remains at a constant 24 degrees. And if you have prolonged dry periods, well, the toad goes into the burrow and it can stay there for weeks on end. They have different strategies, though, for the two different habitats that they tend to use. They're found in sand dunes, like this one here, and in sandy heaths. Let me get my little toad out here. I'll show you now. So in the sand dunes, they dig horizontal burrows. So they'll go in there, emerging at night to feed. But in the sandy heaths, they dig vertical burrows. So it'll stay down there and then it'll come out at night to go and feed. But that's not all. In the sand dunes, they just dig the one burrow. They'll come and breed in these shallow pools, go back, and then they'll come out and feed and use the same burrow again. But on these sandy heaths, what they do is they'll often dig a second burrow near the breeding pools, use that for the breeding season, and then when that's over, they'll go back and they'll use the original burrow there. Isn't that amazing? Incredible little animals. Stick that back there. Now, the sad news is that these two habitats are in decline, and part of the problem is invasion by scrub and other vegetation, but also a decline in grazing animals. But here, the BCP Council has filled in that niche. They clear the scrub and the vegetation around these breeding pools and also between the pools and the burrows. They're doing a fantastic job. And later on, I'll be looking at these specialist pools that the toads need. Now, wind the clock back 40 years, when I was a young bird watcher going up to Scotland. I was working for the RSPB, going up to Scotland to help them count a woodland grouse called the capercaillie. You were tripping over them. You could not avoid them. Unfortunately, now they've declined to such an extent that the authorities are asking people to stay away. Please don't go looking for them. So what's happened? What's gone wrong? And what's being done to rectify the situation? Megs went to find out.
Deep in the heart of Scotland's northern pine woods lives a bird synonymous with the Highlands. Between the trees, a striking red eye, iridescent neck and radiant fan tail tease glimpses of one of the rarest and shyest inhabitants of the forest, a male capercaillie. April brings him out of the shadows as it sparks the start of spring's courtship. Males assemble at a lek to dance and impress the gathering females. But sadly, sights like this one have become increasingly rare. In the 1970s, we had an estimated 20,000 capercaillie living throughout Scotland. But since then, we've lost the equivalent of one capercaillie every single day. With only 1% of their native pine forests remaining, habitat loss and habitat fragmentation are two of the main reasons for their rapid decline. Now their population is thought to be around 542, making them one of the rarest birds we have in our forests. This makes them a major concern for researchers and conservationists alike. One of them is Jack Bamber, a postgraduate researcher at the University of Aberdeen. So what was it about capercaillie then that brought you to this project?
I've always been interested in working with species that are of conservation concern and trying to find ways that we can help boost their numbers. With capercaillie numbers being so low, when every nest means something more to the population, we need ways that we can try and mitigate things like predation without changing the good conservation that's been happening for the predators in these ecosystems as well.
Within the forest, there are a number of predators who see capercaillie eggs and chicks as prey. Badgers, foxes, and more recently, one of the area's conservation success stories, the pine marten. During the 19th century, pine martens were themselves an extremely rare sight in these forests after years of persecution. But since their protection in 1981, their numbers have slowly been recovering. Great news for the pine marten. For the capercaillie, it's an additional pressure, as pine marten are the top predator of capercaillie nests here. Of course, the ideal situation is that both can exist happily, and that's where Jack comes in.
So the main technique that I've been looking at is something called diversion refeeding, which is where we put carrion and different food out specifically so that the predators that are living in this ecosystem can eat that instead of maybe eating rare prey like capercaillie and their nests. And it's a natural process. I mean, these predators would be eating carrion normally by themselves in any ecosystem that they're living in, so we're just helping them along the way.
Jack's theory was that by supplying an alternative food source like a carcass during capercaillie breeding season, predators would be enticed away from the nests towards the easy food source instead. And the results he found were pretty surprising.
What we found is in the sites where we are providing that carrion, as opposed to our control sites where we didn't provide any carrion, just had the nests, is that we saw an increase in nest survival by about 83%.
83%?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a mammoth statistic.
Yeah, so that's a really big change, which is a really positive result from the experiment.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Because predators won't put in effort if they don't need to. It's a waste of energy. Why would you bother going and searching and scrambling for some small eggs when just around the corner you've got a smelly lump of really delicious meat that you can go and gorge yourself on? It makes sense as a predator to go to that instead of the others.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. It really shows the potential of this method is really good to manage the impact of the predators as opposed to the populations of the predators.
In fact, Jack's diversion refeeding strategy has been so successful, it's now being implemented across Scotland.
It's sort of the dream of any researcher is to actually get your research used by people, so I've been really lucky in that regard that people have been so keen to engage with this strategy.
Yeah, lucky capercaillie too. Thanks to Jack's brilliant conservation work alongside Cairngorm's Connect Predator project, capercaillie stand a fighting chance. In the early 1990s, they thought the bird could become extinct by 2010. But the fact they're still here 30 years after that prediction is just phenomenal. And hopefully this pioneering work will go on to safeguarding their future even longer.
Hats off to Jack. Bit of research implemented, working, and what a spectacular bird. Honestly, what a bird.
I love a showy bird. That is a showy
It's
bird, isn't it?
outstanding, isn't it? And for that reason, it regularly attracts the attention of photographers. And as Yolo was saying in the introduction, it's really important that now the population is so depressed that we do leave them alone. So there's a campaign running called Lek It Be, hashtag Lek It Be. That's L-E-K It Be. Look that up if you are a photographer, and do show some, well, common sense and sensitivity to these birds if you are going out, but we really ask you not to between March and August of every year.
Lek It Be, that's going to be a little earworm now, and I feel like whispering words of wisdom on the back of that.
Wasted on me, I'm afraid, not my generation.
Yeah, right. Now, if you cast your mind back to Winterwatch, you may remember that we tried to solve a mystery that was happening on a beach just the other side of these gorse bushes. And it was basically our team noticed that there were lots of smashed clamshells on the beach, and they wanted to know who the culprit was. So they put the cameras out. We saw foxes, we saw some corvids, but we didn't see any of them in action until now. And this is what we saw. A gull taking one of those clamshells, flapping its wings to get high, really difficult to break, but it drops it on the ground, it smashes open, and the gull is then able to have a nice feast. And our crew noticed that there were quite a few gulls that were doing that in this particular area. So up they go with the clamshell, drop it out the beak, and once again down they go, and they enjoy it. But they noticed it wasn't just the gulls that were doing it. They also saw crows doing it. And what they saw with the crows was they actually perfected this technique. You don't want to go too low when you fly, because otherwise it's not going to break the shell. You don't want to go too high, because then you waste energy. So the crows got it just right. And most times when they dropped the clam, it shattered and they managed to get what was inside. So they watched each other, they learned off each other. This is socially learnt behaviour.
Social learning, well, advanced social learning, that's thought to be something which is peculiarly human. And it comes in the form of when an individual can learn something which it couldn't otherwise learn throughout the entire course of its life. And that leads to something called cumulative culture. And again, that's something that only we can do it. Now, as an example, imagine a laptop. I couldn't build from scratch a laptop in my entire lifetime. Not from scratch, but I could, if I sat in a factory watching someone put one together, I could mimic that, I could copy it and I could put it together. I mean, I wouldn't buy it when I'd finished, to be quite honest with you, but I could do that. And up until recently, indeed March of this year, it was thought that only humans could do this, but that's been challenged in 2 papers. The first was about chimpanzees, and I know what you're thinking, well, if anything's going to come close to human capacity, it's the chimpanzee. But the other was more interesting. It was published by Dr. Alice Bridges and Professor Lars Chitka from Queen Mary University in London, and it was their study of bumblebees. Now take a look at this. They put this choice chamber together, which they put bees into. And here is a little pot of nectar. But to get that nectar, the bee has to complete a 2-stage task. It has to push this door up here. Oh, hold on. It has to push this door up here so it stays open like that. And once it's got that open, it can then push this across here like this, and then it can get to the nectar. So it's got to do those 2 things in order. So what they did was they put a group of bees in here for 8 days. That's about 1/3 of their lifetime. And what they found was if they just put them in here, they could never get to the nectar. They simply couldn't solve that. But then they took another group of bees and they trained them, took them a couple of days, just 2 days. They trained the bee to do exactly this, to push that flange up and then push that flange over and get to that. Then they did something interesting. This is the crux. They put a bee that had never been in the chamber before with one of the bees that they'd trained. Take a look at this. Here you can see one of the bees very proactively going through what it had learned in that couple of days of training, and the other bee, the naive bee, following it around. And what they noticed was that they would tap each other's antennae. They found that a third of all of the naive bees they put in could learn that behaviour by copying the other bee in the space of just 2 days, when previously they just simply couldn't do it. This is social learning in insects, which is remarkable because we thought it was just down to us humans. Even more remarkable when I tell you that the brain of a bumblebee is the size of a full stop and has 1 million neurons in it. The human brain, on the other hand, is much larger, as you know, and has 100 billion neurons in it. So it's not to do with brain size or how many neurons you've got, it's to do with the need to understand possibly this type of learning in order to prosper. But advanced social learning in bumblebees is absolutely fantastic.
Do you know, it is amazing, and that experiment and the explanation is absolutely amazing, but sometimes I do think we're a little bit arrogant to think that we're the clever ones, and isn't it remarkable that they can do the same things as us? Whereas I think, yeah, they're probably doing the same thing as us all the time with their brains. But yeah, I mean, interesting stuff.
Fantastic stuff.
And I think we are socially learning from each other all the time. I watch you and I know that you are learning to be sociable from me. Is that something different?
Well, I mean, I haven't made much progress in the last, 30 years, have I really?
I think basically we're all socially learning of each other.
Trying to drag me into a bar of the evening is quite difficult, isn't it?
Aren't we, Megs?
It's a work in progress with Chris and Michaela, isn't it? We've got to keep trying, though. We'll keep attempting to help him out. Oh, now, another amazing animal that makes its home here on the shores of Scalpsea Bay is a small bird, a ringed plover. And we saw them on the show yesterday, but we've recently been getting some amazing views of these enigmatic birds. They've got that distinctive band around the head, orange, almost luminous orange feet with an orange bill and a black tip. And the back of the bird, that sandy colour, blends in perfectly within its environment. There's about 5,450 pairs in the UK at the minute, but sadly numbers are declining, although they're clearly trying to help themselves out. But a consensus in 2007 found that 37% of the population had declined since 1984. Incredibly sad, but this is why it's so special to come here and see them breeding upon the shoreline. And the way they nest is they make scrapes in the ground, typically on shingled beaches, and they'll get seashells, they'll get pebbles in, and they'll nestle down where they can work together. Both the male and female will help incubate the egg, and they can lay up to 4 eggs. This, I think, is the male. He tends to have a bit of a blacker band around his head than the female. And you can see he's fluffing up his feathers to sit on those eggs, and the female comes in and takes over, make sure that all the feathers are nicely round, making as much contact with the eggs as possible to keep them nice and warm. Now, very sadly, these birds are disturbed by people coming to beaches. Obviously, we want to come to beaches. It's a beautiful landscape, but we've just got to be cautious about causing too much disturbance. And if you're coming with your dog, I love my dogs, but I always make sure to keep them on a lead wherever I can. Now, we've created a dummy ringed plover nest to have a look at. Now, you can see it's quite well camouflaged within the nest. And if you look, we've made some little eggs. They're speckled, they're quite white in colour, they're blending in with the environment. And what's interesting is that they're incredibly well camouflaged because they reflect UV light. And ultimately, with the speckled nature, they stay well within. And you can have a look within that image there. Can you spot any of those eggs on the ground amongst the pebbles? Because it took me a little while to get my eye in to really see. There are 2 eggs there, actually. Have a look, there they are. Slight brown in colour. You can see that brown speckle, which gives them such good camouflage, especially for things that might want to predate them, things like larger gulls or mammals that may want to come. Oh, apparently I'm just hearing we've got Steve. We have live ringed plover right now. Let's go to Steve's camera Have we got them? Look, there we go! Live plover! Yes! Oh, that makes me happy. Feeding on invertebrates on the seashore. Ah, I love it when a plan comes together. Now, these birds camouflage themselves not only visually, but also through olfactory, their ability to scent. Now, they have a gland at the base of their tail which produces a secretion which helps them with waterproofing and also to eliminate parasites. But they change the scent of the secretion depending on the time of year. And a study done in 2022 investigated 59 different species, but found that ground nesting birds like the ring plover did this to a greater extent. So in April, when they start to breed, they change their scent to not be quite so smelly, again to hide away from predators, something they called olfactory crypsis, and then they kind of return to their usual scent throughout the rest of the year. Another hypothesis that they think is working in unison is something called sex semiochemicals, which is by changing your chemical signature at the breeding time of year, you're notifying that your mate and you're ready to go, you're ready to lay some eggs, and you're basically displaying your fitness to your partner. How wonderful is that? Beautiful animals. Have we got them live again? Why not? They're there. Oh, I do love a ringed plover. I think they've got gorgeous coloration, but they are cute. They're not quite as cute as their chicks when they do hatch. Now, they incubate their eggs for about 24 days, and then as soon as those chicks are dry, they're able to run around. They just look like fluffy little pom-poms with neon orange legs. But you can see how perfectly camouflaged they are. They are that same colour as the rock, they've got that grey, but that banding as well, just to distort their body shape. So any predator, you can see that black ring around the back of its head. Looking at it, it doesn't look like typical bird shape. So distortion camouflage is something that's really good as well. Now, from adorable ringed plover chicks to an animal that we all know and love, something that we can hear a lot of the time, and we can see whether we're in the heart of the countryside or in urban cities and towns. Now, I'm really excited that we're going to go to a film by Matt Moran looking at urban foxes in London.
London. Bright lights illuminate the city streets. Cars crowd the roads. But something else is treading the tarmac under the cover of night, as it's the perfect place for some crafty canines. Found on almost every continent on Earth, foxes are versatile. This one's making the most of the resources on offer. Unfazed by passers-by as it scouts for scraps. But this vixen has discovered a sanctuary. Tucked away behind the busy city streets, an inviting allotment. A slither of safety amidst our man-made chaos. Not a bad spot to forage for worms. Even an urban fox's diet is made up of 82% natural foods. You can't have a takeaway every day, after all. But this precarious city living comes at a cost, as urban foxes live shorter lives compared to their countryside cousins. Here, their average life expectancy is just 18 months, compared to 3 years in more rural areas. But this vixen might have just found her own paradise in the heart of the city. As she's managed to successfully produce 4 litters. 1 a year since sexual maturity. Meaning she's at least 5 years old. At 2 months old, her cubs are out and about exploring their new plot, with plenty of room for them to play safely. As the weeks pass and the cubs grow, they make the most of their natural larder. But if they're going to survive here, they're going to need to get streetwise. Swapping the safety of the allotment for the concrete jungle. Which has an altogether different outlook. Time passes, seasons change, and another year has passed on the allotment. The vixen has not only survived, but thrived. And defying all the odds, she's given birth to her 5th litter, sheltered in the security of her allotment. And she's learned how to take advantage of all that's on offer here. A wood pigeon will do quite nicely. But she's not above some fast food from the neighbours. After all, she's got many hungry mouths to feed. This year, she isn't lone parenting. One of last year's cubs stayed on the allotment and seems happy to muck in with the childcare duties. With the vixen having raised 5 sets of cubs over the past 6 years within the safety of the allotment, it's no wonder that some of them want to follow in the footsteps of this city's supermum. How do I radiate bliss?
You're doing it.
Oh,
You're doing
good.
it quite well.
Oh, foxes, second best mammal on the planet.
To what?
Poodle, obviously, for goodness sake.
Do you know, that really was an absolutely
Oh,
gorgeous film.
stunning.
And I'm really pleased that we had such a delightful film before we do our Peregrine update, which is a little bit of a contrast. It was dramatic yesterday. Well, all I can say is strap yourselves in. Take a deep breath, because here we go for today's update. So this is Corfe Castle. This is where the peregrine nest is, nestled into the wall. And yesterday, our update ended on the 17th of May. And in that nest, we saw 2 little peregrine chicks poking their heads out. We then watched the female trying to feed the newly hatched chick, the smaller chick. Pretty unsuccessful, unfortunately. The older one was getting fed, but you can see she keeps trying to put that food in the little one's mouth, in the beak. Doesn't go in. And eventually she almost gets a bit irritated with it. And we noticed that she started to peck the chick. And then even the chick just gives up. She then leaves the nest. So that's her going from the nest, and then the male flies in. That screeching is the female watching the male. And there's a reason that she's screeching, because what happens next is pretty shocking. The male goes to that little chick and starts to rip pieces out of it. It rips a bit of the leg off. I hate to tell you this, but the chick is still alive, and starts feeding it to the sibling. The female comes in. The male then looks somewhat confused, and then the female puts that little chick out of its misery and decides to scoff it down. Still alive, it's whole. In the beak it goes, and it swallows it. And then she settles down on the nest, screeching away. There's a lot of displeasure there from that female. I mean, it's brutal, isn't it? It really was not an easy watch, that. But what on earth happened? Why on earth did he do that?
OK, here are a few theories. Was it a different male? Highly unlikely, because the female would have stormed in and chased that male away. Is it that the male decided that wasn't his chick? Unlikely. How would he do that in just a couple of days? Could it have been that somehow he detected there was something wrong with that chick? Again, unlikely in that space of time, although it wasn't feeding properly, so it could be that. Or could it be brood reduction? And this is where some birds will actually kill their own young to ensure the survival of others. Coots do that. But there's only 2 in the nest, and they've got plenty of food, so it's not that. The most likely theory is that it's an under-experienced male. Take a look at this. We look very carefully at some feathers on his wing, and this is micro detail. And we showed this to some peregrine experts, and they spotted these tiny little feathers which indicate that this bird may be a 2-year-old, in which case this would be his first breeding attempt. Those feathers appear on both sides. It's not absolutely certain. He could be a 2-year-old. And if that were the case, maybe he just came back to the nest. The chick wasn't moving. He wanted to feed the other one. He was a bit confused, inexperienced. Maybe that's what rolled out.
Oh, it's an awful error, wasn't it? I mean, it really does show you that it can be brutal. Wildlife is so brutal. We will continue to update you on the peregrines, and I'm really hoping that it gets less dramatic as we move forward. Talking moving forward, let's move this way, because we're going to show you where Yolo is. Yolo is behind us here. He's not behind the gorse bushes, well, I hope he's not anyway. He's in the distance there, and if I swam over that bit of water past Brownsea Island, about 12 miles, I'd eventually reach him. Yolo.
I am indeed. 12 miles exactly, I think, Michael. I think you're spot on there. Now, as you can see, I've left the little sandy cliffs behind me there, and I've come down to have a look at the ponds where the natterjack toads breed. Now, you'll see that there's a fence here, wired fence, and that is there to keep people and dogs out. But if you have a look down here, you'll see that they've cut little passageways. Those are natterjack toads' highways, allowing them to get from the burrows to the ponds. What I want to know is, why do the natterjack toads use this pond, but not the pond in my back garden? And to answer that, I have a prop and I have an expert. I have Harold Innes from the Amphibian and Reptile Conservation. Howard Innes, sorry Howard. Simple question straight away. Why is this pond good for natterjack toads?
Okay, simple answer, Yolo, because it's warm, and that's what they're after. Natterjack toads need very, very warm ponds to breed successfully, and the shallower they are, like this, that pond will be really warm, so it's exposed to the sun. Problem is, it might dry up, so there is a sweet spot for natterjacks, and it's round about there where the pond's shallow enough to stay really warm in time for those tadpoles to get out, to metamorphose, to turn into toads before the pond dries up. And if the pond's deeper, a few things happen. First of all, it gets a bit colder, so the natterjack toads aren't quite so comfortable in there. And also, it attracts other amphibians. And we know that natterjack toad tadpoles don't do well, particularly if you've got species like common toad tadpoles in the same pond. And it also increases the number of insect predators. So you get things like dragonfly larvae, you get water beetle larvae, and you get the water boatmen, the backswimmers, that take quite a lot of tadpoles. So the pond needs to dry up, actually, but it needs to dry up once the toadlets have got out. So it's a fine balance.
That is incredibly niche. It's got to be difficult to manage it, to get it just right.
It's hugely difficult to manage it, to get it just right. They're actually quite a frustrating little beast, even though they're beautiful. And at one time, when they lived in these big dune systems, which are dynamic, so the thing's moving all the time, and the gaps in between the big dune ridges would have filled with water because the water table would have been higher, so they'd have had their choice to select exactly the right types of ponds. Now, when we reintroduced them here in around about 1990, so it's about 25 years ago, we decided to put concrete lined ponds in because that would give us the right depth, the right warmth to allow them to successfully metamorphose, and also allows us to keep an eye on the water levels and top up if necessary.
So if I was to go and have a look in there now, at what stage in their development are they?
Again, that's really interesting because in this pond at the moment we've got several stages. We've got tadpoles from spawn that was laid about 4 weeks ago, but the first spawning was a couple of weeks before that, and what we've got from that are toadlets starting to emerge. So they're actually around the edge of the pond, so they're starting to come out. And right now, this week, we're starting to see what we believe is a second spawning, because females do sometimes come back and spawn a second time. So we're seeing that happen. So we've got spawn in there as well. So we've got several different stages of development in that pond right now.
Now, I'm sure you saw Jake Morris's wonderful natterjack toad film on Springwatch last night. He also captured some fascinating footage of spinning eggs. Why do they do that?
Well, he got some great footage, and that was fascinating. We've never seen that in natterjack toads before, and those macro shots really brought it to life. That egg was about 24 hours old, so it's 24 hours after fertilisation, so at quite an early stage in its development. The embryo is at the top, the yolk is at the bottom, and we do know that there are mechanisms inside eggs which get them the right way up, and they're caused by tiny little aligned microtubules inside the egg, and the action of proteins against those microtubules creates some level of movement. But it could also be that the outside of the egg has got tiny hairs on cilia, which if they're waving in harmony, could cause that egg to vibrate. But that motorized movement, some were going clockwise, some were going anti-clockwise, amazing to see that. So the jury's still out about exactly what's happening, but yeah, amazing to see it. But what that does also is it evens out the warming up that egg gets. So it makes sense for it to rotate, so that each part of the egg warms up at the same rate, so probably aids their development as well.
I'll tell you what, I know someone who'll have a view on this, Professor Chris Packham.
I'm sure he will.
Chris, what do you reckon, small hairs or is it chemicals?
Well, Yellow, I've been delving through the literature because we did think this was new to science, but we were wrong because it was actually on April the 28th, 1870 in the journal Nature that Dr. Schenk reported that it was well known that the embryo of the frog exhibits remarkable movements of rotation. He timed them. He said they rotated in 5 minutes and 13 seconds to 12 minutes and 2 seconds. He was very, very precise. He said that they result from the presence of ciliated cells. So just like Howard said, these are cells with tiny hairs that waft to generate movement. And he confirmed that by the application of moderate heat, which sped the movement up. And then he added the action of weak acids, which are known to operate in the same way on ciliary movements. And that actually slowed them down. So it could be that 150 years ago, Dr. Schenk solved that problem, but we all forgot about it until that film was made just a few weeks ago.
And it's amazing to think that that's happening in everybody's ponds, isn't it? And
absolutely
most
incredible.
of us have never noticed it. Brilliant stuff. Well, from all that spinning around, it's time to centre ourselves, to let go of the information overload and enjoy the calmness and beauty of a river. beautiful. It makes me want to get my binoculars and go and sit by a river. Not for 90 seconds, perhaps. Not even 90 minutes. 90 days, how about that?
As long as you don't get your swimming trunks and get in the river, you'll probably be all right.
You don't want to do that, do you? No, no. Anyway, let's have a look at our live nests again. We've just about got time for that before the end of the programme. There they all are. I'm going to go to our oyster catcher that's off the nest now.
See the eggs. There they are, in the foreground there, look.
Actually, that's quite surprising, isn't it? That there's nothing on that nest right now. But look what we have seen, because I really enjoy this nest. Because look, it's sitting calmly. Along comes the other adult. And look, it's sort of saying, oi, oi, get off, it's my turn. It's my turn. Look, just move, come on, I'm a bit impatient. You're sitting around, you dozed off. I've come here, you told me what time to get here, and I just need you to get off the eggs now.
Yeah, but look, I like this. When it pushes it up, it's like it's got pins and needles. Look, it's like,
I know the feeling. And the other one settles down on those eggs and starts to brood. I love that. We might see those hatching, you never know, next week maybe.
Indeed, we might. Last chance to take a look round our nest. What do we got? Let's have a look at our song thrush. Let's go to our song thrushes. It's a lovely little nest. The chicks are head down in there. Kestrels, come on, quick, kestrel. Let's go for kestrel. There might be some action there. Oh, there they are, look. Just preening away. And you can see, look, some of their adult feathers coming through.
Well, that's brought us to the end of tonight's programme. I've got some very important information that you must listen to because we're not with you live tomorrow, Thursday. We're back on Friday at a different time, 7:30. What time?
7:30.
7:30. So we'll see you at 7:30 on Friday. And this is what we have coming up. We'll be featuring rapper and zoologist Louis VI, who wants to encourage us to really listen to the sounds of nature.
And I'll be off to meet the otters that make Butte their home.
And I'm going to be heading back to Arndt to find out what happened to our final peregrine chick.
OK, we may not be here tomorrow, but remember you can wake up with the watches because from 7 o'clock in the morning through to 10 o'clock at night, you can catch all of our cameras. And I've got to tell you that immediately after this programme, you should head to the iPlayer because Jack Badams and Henry are going to be there providing a commentary of what's happening on those nests. Plenty of those to look at. We've got a few new ones that you might be able to see. The song thrush. Got a Dartford warbler, those owls will be coming active as well. So check out that on iPlayer in a moment, and we'll see you on Friday at 7:30.
Should we watch the sunset? Come on, sit down.
Okay.
Look at that.
You can explore some of our amazing and different species and the diverse habitats in which they live by ordering the Open University's free poster. To get your copy, call 0300 303 2465 or go to bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and then follow the links to the Open University.